I'm James Turk. I'm a director of the Gold Money Foundation, and it's my pleasure to be here today with David Tice, who is the founder of the Prudent Bear Fund, and importantly, the sponsor of a watershed event in 1999 called the Credit Bubble Symposium, where he brought in speakers from all over the world and basically laid out far in advance what was happening in terms of the bubble that was occurring in the United States and the subsequent credit collapse. David, I wanted to talk, starting with that, what did you see in 1999 that most people were missing?
Well, I saw in 1999, James, the fact that we had asset inflation and that this reckless money creation was providing asset inflation. I was a big believer in von Mises and Rothbard, and that this asset inflation had created the internet bubble, the telecom bubble. From 96 to 99, the market went up 4 straight years. I'd started the Prudent Bear Fund in 1996, and you'd think that I would have been completely, beside myself, pulling out all my hair. But I understood that this was simply asset inflation, and it would end badly. And felt like consumer was borrowing far too much money, governments were borrowing way too much money, and it would end very, very badly. And there was great academic evidence supporting this. However, nobody really saw it.
So 1996, as I recall, was the year that Alan Greenspan, who was the chairman of the Federal Reserve at that time, was talking about irrational exuberance in the stock market, but we went a few years more. And this was being fueled by fractional reserve banking, banks continuing to lend and lend and lend?
Exactly. And I called on that famous speech from Greenspan. The Dow is about 6,300. And really, he laid it out for us. And I think he tried to do the right thing for a little while, but then he did not possess the courage that he should have. And frankly, we had wrong-headed economic theory. The Keynesian monetarist theory were all saying this was okay. And I used to call it the Al Davis School of Economics, which is just print money, baby. And as long as the CPI remained below 3%, there was no real concern about reckless money creation.
But isn't that still basically the same policy, and therefore they're still on the wrong road? I mean, Bernanke has basically only one remedy for everything that ails the economy, which is just print, print, print. And obviously that's not the right answer, correct?
These are one-trick ponies, James, and that certainly is a policy today, and that's why I'm trying to do what I can to support the Keynes versus Hayek videos that are out there. These guys at Economist Stories and Mercatus are doing a great job trying to educate, and we need to get policy back where people understand von Mises, Rothbard, Hayek, et cetera, and move away from Keynes.
Yeah. Keynes is famous for the quote that in the long run we're all dead, but a number of people are starting to recognizing in the long run Keynesianism is dead because it's a false policy, because it's built on the assumption that you can borrow to infinity, and obviously you can't, because it has implications that ultimately the currency is going to be destroyed. So potentially the dollar is going to be destroyed, in your view, as a form of currency if we don't get off this road?
Oh, in fact, the famous quote from von Mises is there's no end to a credit-induced expansion, that you have two choices, either a voluntary abandonment of that credit expansion, which means our policymakers become statesmen and do the right thing and end the credit excess. And of course, we've seen nothing of the sort. Or the second is a complete and utter destruction of the currency involved, which is where we're on the path.
So despite the political posturing in Washington surrounding the debt limit increase and a lot of the talk about cutting the budget, you don't really see enough happening in Washington by policymakers to suggest that they are doing the right thing.
Yeah, these guys are still whistling past the graveyard. They do not really understand, and unfortunately, with the terms that we have, 2 years for Congress, 6 years for Senate, 4 years for President, everybody's trying to, kick the can down the road, and they don't want to do what's required in order that's required for discipline. And because they're still listening to policy from the Keynesian monetarist theory that says it's going to be okay, and therefore they kick the can down the road, and they feel like, well, they're not going to be, they're going to push it beyond, the next election, and therefore it's going to be okay, and it's not going to be okay.
If they don't have the political will now to solve the problem, do you think they'll have the political will in 2 years or 4 years or 6 years to solve the problem?
Unfortunately, it's going to be like a drunken sailor, and they're going to keep drinking until the booze is taken from them. And that's going to happen in the credit markets, where there's going to be a failed treasury auction or something of the sort, where the dollar declines below 70 or 60, et cetera, where gold goes to $5,000. That's what's going to cause reality to come back.
Yeah, you mentioned a drunken sailor. I had a funny thing happen to me. I was using that example, comparing politicians to drunken sailors, and an old Navy guy came up to me after my presentation and said, don't compare politicians to drunken sailors. It gives drunken sailors a bad name.
Exactly, that's exactly true.
And what's happening in Washington today is, I think, really just a shame that people just aren't standing up and making the tough decisions that need to be made, but recognizing that we're on the wrong road.